Okay, Rabotai, let's do it. Erev Shabbat Kodesh, Parshat Tavo. So, gentlemen, I just want to tell you something that I read in the books today. Small Hidush, not going to be here for too long. It has to do with the Kilalot. It has to do with the Barachot. Barachot, Kilalot. In fact, I saw one of the rabbis that say we don't call it Kilalot. We don't call it curses. We call it Tochachot. We call it rebukes. As a side note, I saw from Rabbi Mutzafi, he brings the name of the Arizal, that if you count how many times in the Torah, it says the word arur. What does the word arur mean? Cursed. It says the word arur 11 times. 11 times arur this, arur that, arur this, arur that. So he says that in order to negate, in order to combat the 11 arurs, he says, especially by the Sfaradim, in our Kaddish, and you're supposed to have kavanah for this. In the Kaddish, kavanah, when we enter, Yehesh Lamar Rabba Mitzmaya, Hayim, V'Sava, V'Yeshua, V'Nehama, V'Shazava, U'Refuah, U'Geula, U'Slicha, V'Chapara, V'Reva, V'Hatzala. 11 times. 11 times when he entered that Kaddish, what do Ashkenazim do? I don't know. They are rude, I guess. But they say that by Sfaradim, we're answering those 11 words. Your kavanah is supposed to having in those times. I think I told you one time. I said that one time. Someone came up to me and he told me he's like, but you Sfaradim. He tells me Ashkenaz guy. You Sfaradim. It's always about panasa. That's what we're talking about. He says because you're saying the Kaddish v'revach. And everybody screams out, Berevach. What does that mean, Berevach? It means in abundance, right? Berevach. And I told him, I said, you started with the wrong guy. I told him. I said, there's a lot of depth between that. I said that in the Ashrei, what do we say, Romy? You remember me saying this? I said this like a few months ago one night. I said in the Ashrei, when we say every single day, you're supposed to have kavanah the boteach. Boteach et yadecha is parnasa, right? So you're supposed to have in mind, on the regular understanding, you're supposed to think that Hashem, I'm opening my hands and everything, all the sustenance, all the livelihood comes directly from you, and we don't want to rely on anybody else. That's like the simple understanding. But the Kabbalah behind it is that you're supposed to have kavanah for Rosh Tevot, certain initial letters. So the rabbis tell us that Poteach et Yadecha Rosh Tevot. So it means the Pei and the Aleph and the Yud. Poteach to Pei. Et, that's an aleph, yadecha, that's yud. So that's the first kavanah you're supposed to have. Potechet yadecha, rosh tevot, pei, aleph, yud. And then he says, you're also supposed to have kavanah for samich, aleph, lamed. Happens to be that, what is it?
Sof adam lamut.
Exactly, sof adam lamut. That even though a person's praying for panasa, you should have in mind sof adam lamut. The bottom line is that even though you're right, you need panasa, but also sof adam lamut. The bottom line is that you're going to pass away one day, and therefore the panasa that you're praying for, you're not going to take it with you. That's another kavanah. I don't think that's exactly what it means, by the way. I just think that people, they put it that way to remember it. But samach alef lamed, that's another kavanah. And finally he says, you're supposed to have sofei tevot. Sofei tevot. So besides the rosh tevot, pei aleph yud, also sofei tevot, which is poteach, that's a het, et, that's a taf, yadecha, that's a chav sofit. So rosh tevot, het, exactly, het, taf, chav sofit. Rosh tevot, or sofit tevot, chatach. You're supposed to have that kavanah. So the rabbis tell us, if you take the gematria of chatach, let's do it together, the het is 8, right? Then you have the chav sofit is 20, that's 28, and then the taf is 400, so 428. That's the gematria of chatach. So says the rabbis, when a person says the words Berevach, well, what's the gematria of Berevach? Berevach alone is, Resh is 200, the Vav is 6, and 8 is 214. But we don't say Revach, we say Berevach. What's Berevach? That means double Revach. Double Revach, double 214 is 128. You're saying it's a bit of a dohak, it's a push. Anyway, that's what they say. So Berevach, right? So when a person says Berevach Matzala, he's supposed to be thinking Parnasa. Huh? What's Mizonot? Oh, the chalent? You're asking if it's mizonot? I don't know what is inside. Yeah, this brought of course it's mizonot.
Right, also, is there something similar to Chazak Baruch?
Yeah, what's the Chazak?
No, I'm asking, like you say, not just about Shkaya, like additional.
I guess, okay, maybe, I don't know. If you can work out a gemati with the Chazak Baruch, that'd be much better. But that's what he says. Verevach Vatzalah means, you're supposed to have kavanah. When you answer the words, Verevach Vatzalah, your kavanah is supposed to be Hatach. That Hashem should give me the panasa that way. So therefore, everything that we do especially with the Sfaradim, it has deep significance. The only thing that, because we're answering these 11 words, no, these 11 words are very significant because it has to do with the negation of the 11 arurim that it said in Parshat. It also says, by the way, that also by the Ketoret. By Ketoret also you have 11 spices. Right? Supposed to count it. Also 11 spices. Not only that, but Yosef says on Rosh Hashanah we'll begin to pray in the additions of the prayer. What's one of the additions that we have by the Amidah? What do we say? Zurhainu l'chayim, melech hafetz b'chayim, kotvenu b'sever hayim, namanach Elohim hayim. 11 words. So again, the same thing. You're supposed to have kavanah. That when you say these things, you're supposed to have kavanah. That these things are supposed to negate 11 arurim. That's inside Parshat Tavo. These things are supposed to combat those 11 items. Anyway, that's just a side hidush from the Arizal. But what I really came to discuss was the thought process of Moshe Rabbeinu. Again, in Parshat Tavo, who's talking? It's Moses. Moshe Rabbeinu is talking. And yet he's giving us, as what's referred to in the books as tzach kelalot. Tzach is Rosh Tevot for it's by Gematria 98. So Moshe Rabbeinu gives us 98 curses. And the question is, why is Moshe Rabbeinu giving us these curses before he passes away? You want to tell me because he wants to give us, tuchacha, he wants to give us rebuke for. But again, I don't want to understand his kavanah, especially because at the very end, by Zot HaBaracha, he gives us a baracha. All right, Zot HaBaracha sheberach Moshe. So what is the Moshe Rabbeinu thinking over here that he's giving us these curses? Not only that, but it's also some people who get very paranoid. There's some communities. First of all, they read Zot HaBaracha, they read the tzach kelalot, they read it at a very low tone of a voice, and some people are afraid to get that liyah because it's very scary things that are written inside. So therefore, what's Moshe Rabbeinu's thinking that he's cursing Am Yisrael now? Especially Moshe Rabbeinu, we know him as the defender. Anytime there's always an issue, Moshe Rabbeinu is there to defend us. So what is Pishad with the tzach kelalot that Moshe Rabbeinu was talking? Why does he want to give us these curses? So the Hidush comes from a rabbi called Rubinoff. He comes along and he says the big difference between the curses in Tavo, which is our parasha, and the curses of Bechokotai. By the way, the number is also different. Bechotai was actually 49 curses, and by us it's 98 curses. But besides that difference, if you pay attention to the way the curses are worded, in Parshat Tavo he writes, every single time Moshe Rabbeinu puts in a curse, he also adds in the name of Hashem of Havaya. As an example, could you look inside your sheets so you appreciate it in the very first source? I didn't bring down all the curses, but just as an example, in the very first source, it says Yadbek Amunai. Right away, he throws in God's name. Beha et dever. Right away, so Hashem will give you the dever. Dever is pestilence. That's like the curses over there. Not only that, but he also says Yakeha Hashem b'shahevet b'kadahat. Hashem will smite you with wind blasts. Yiten Hashem et matar atzecha avak ve'afar. Again, Hashem will give the rain to avak ve'afar. He's going to make it into the dust. Yitenecha Hashem nigaf lefno oyevecha, that Hashem will allow your enemies to come and overcome you. So therefore says Rabbi Shimon Astropoli, the difference between Bechokotai and Tavo is that even though it sounds like these are curses, still Moshe Rabbeinu made sure to put in the name of God of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei into every single sentence before he gave the curses over. Now, what's significant about the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, which we all know, which we discussed many times in this shiur? Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is Chesed. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is God's name of mercy. So even though it sounds like Moshe Rabbeinu was really trying to curse us over here, but yet he sprinkled a little mercy into it by throwing God's name of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei in order to, so to speak, sweeten up the curses. Not only that, says Rabbi Shimon Astropoli, that if you count how many times Hashem's name appears in the curses, says Moshe Rabbeinu, how many times he put it inside? If you count it, it's exactly 26 times Moshe Rabbeinu puts in God's name in all the curses. Now, why is that number significant? Because if you take 26, which is the amount of time God's name appears in the Torah, in this week's parasha by the curses, multiply it by 26, which is God's name. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is Begematria 26. So 26 multiplied by the 26 times it shows up in parasha. Anybody know what that equals? 26 times 26? Off the top of your heads, anybody? 676. Now, why is that number significant? 676. It doesn't mean anything to anybody here, but the truth is, says Rabbi Shimon Astropoli, if you count how many words there are altogether in the Kelalot, altogether in Parashat, there's about 1,700 words. But in the Kelalah itself, in the actual curses themselves, there are 670 words in the curses. Therefore, says Rabbi Shimon Astropoli, Moshe Rabbeinu very strategically made sure to say Hashem's name exactly 26 times, which if multiplied by its gematria equals 776, which is the exact amount of words there are in the Kelot themselves. Imagine how accurate you have to be by being Moshe Rabbeinu. Imagine right me, I'm talking right now. I don't exactly measure my words. I told them, the word, Hashem 5 times, Rabbeinu 15 times. I don't measure my words. Nobody measures the words. Moshe Rabbeinu, he knew exactly that if I'm giving them 676 words in the curse, I also have to make sure to throw in 26 Yud-Kei Vav-Keis in there, just to make sure that everything is going to be null and void. That's what he says. By the way, this is also a side hidush, which we mentioned in the class a couple of weeks ago. That's why it's Minhag Sfaradim is to say the David at the very end of Shacharit by the by the Chodesh Elul, all the way up until Hoshana Rabbah, we say the last paragraph of LeDavid, right after Leinu Shabbat. Why do we say LeDavid? Anybody know why we say LeDavid? Because he says in the Sidur of Shabtai, he says over there, because if you count how many times Hashem's name is written in the Mizmor of LeDavid, it's how many times? No, you're wrong. It's actually 13 times. Exactly. But some people also have the minhag to do it again by minhag time. So therefore, if you count 13 in the morning and 13 in the afternoon, altogether you had 26. 26 multiplied by 26, that's 676 in order to mivatel the curses in Parshat Tavo. Question?
Apparently some Rabbi wrote
Yeah.
our minhag is to say by minhag.
By minhag also. Okay, it's not really what I've seen, but okay, so there you go. Ashkenazim definitely do it, by the way. But they don't say by minhag. They say by Arvit. They say by Arvit. So I guess the first one is counted by Arvit the first time, then by Shachrit the second time. There you go. That's 30. You have 13 times Yud Kei Vav Kei. Both of them making it 26. 26 is coming to Ben Batel, and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu, what he was doing be'etzem, right? In reality, what he was doing was he was trying to bless the nation through the Yud Kei Vav Keis and sweeten the judgment of the curses that appear in Parshat Tavo. Is that clear so far? So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu's kavanah was very straight and on the point. He specifically did it this way. So whatever curses we're going to get, bottom line is it's going to be somehow neutralized because he's playing around with the Shem Hashem over there, Yud Kei Vav Kei, and everything is going to be considered all fine and dandy. Is that clear so far? But my question is, which is a very deep question, but why do it that way? Yeah, why do it that way? If Moshe Rabbeinu wants to give us bracha, yeah, so then why go like this? Just give us a bracha.
I don't know.
Huh? Oh, what do you mean? What do you mean by ayin hara? What do you mean?
So that people don't put ayin hara.
So people don't put ayin hara on this? I would have said a little deeper. I would have said that anytime you had a bracha from a tremendous character like Moshe Rabbeinu, like the Satan tries to stop it, that would make more sense. That's why if you think about it, the way Mashiach came to this world, or coming to this world, it's through very strange type of relationships, right? The first time Mashiach came to the world, or his great-great-great-great-grandfather is who? His great-great-grandfather is Lot, yeah, because Lot had a illegal relationship with his daughters, and through his daughters became Ammon and Moab, and through Ammon and Moab you have Ruth, and through Ruth you have King David, and King David you have David HaMelech. You have Moshe Melech Mashiach. So the truth is that the Melech Mashiach is born through the zivug of an illegal relationship between Lot and his daughters. And you're asking yourself, what in the world? Why does it have to be that way? Not only that, go even after that. Who is also a great-great-grandfather of Melech HaMashiach? It's Yudah. And Yudah had an illegal relationship with his daughter-in-law. And you're thinking to yourself, what in the world is going on here? Why does Hashem have to make it where Mashiach is brought to this world with seemingly a very illegal type of a marriage? The answer is because since God gave a certain, we'll call it kawah, he gave a certain power to the Satan, he knows that the Satan has a lot of tricks up his sleeve in order to stop the ultimate redemption of Am Yisrael. And therefore, if God would have given us Mashiach through the regular channels, then it could be the Satan would have stopped it on the spot and forget about it. There's no redemption ever. Therefore, Hashem has to do it in a way where he does it through illegal relationships, because the moment the Satan saw Yehuda with his daughter-in-law Tamar, he says to himself, yeah, nothing is coming out of this, I'm going to leave them alone. The moment the Satan saw Lot with his own daughters, what does he say to himself? Nothing's coming out of this, I'm going to leave them alone. And that's why Hashem has to bring Mashiach through them. Why? Because if he didn't do it this way, the Satan would have stopped him. That is the way I always understood. So maybe same thing over here. If Moshe Rabbeinu was giving us a blessing straight out, maybe the Satan would have found a way somehow in order to block the blessing. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu makes a blessing in disguise, like the topic of today's shiur, in order to give blessing to Am Yisrael. That could be one Parshat. But I saw something amazing. And the explanation is as follows. By the way, that's why, if you think about it, if you read David HaMelech in Tehillim, go back to Rabbi Shimon Ashopoli. He says that if you could just appreciate it for a second, look at Tehillim in the second source. What do we say? We read this on Shabbat. We say, Rabot, Ra'ot Tzadik, Umikulam, Yatzilenu, Amunai. That's what we say. Simply, what does that mean? Rabot, Ra'ot Tzadik. The Tzadik has many troubles. However, Umikulam, but everything, Yatzilenu Hashem. Hashem saves us from these many troubles. Says Rabbi Shimon Ashopoli, you're reading it wrong. He says like this: the tzaddik in this pasuk is referring to Moshe Rabbeinu, and the word ra'ot in gematria is how much? 676. Therefore, he says we can do it together. The resh is 200, yeah. Resh is 200. The taf is 400. That's so far. How many you have? You have not rabot. Go back to ra'ot. I meant rabot. I meant ra'ot, not rabot. Go to ra'ot. Ra'ot. The resh is 200. The taf is The Taf is 400, the 600 altogether. Ayin is 70, and the Vav is 6. Therefore, when it says in the Torah, Rabot Ra'ot Tzaddik, the Tzaddik, who's Moshe Rabbeinu, he gave us Rabot Ra'ot. He gave us 676 curses, the words of the curses. But who's going to save us? Umikulam Yatzilenu Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's from the Yud Kei Vav Keis, are we going to be saved from the Ra'ot. So therefore, Rabot Ra'ot Tzaddik. The Tzaddik gave us Rabot Ra'ot, many curses of the 676 Gematria Ra'ot. However, he's going to save us through Umikulam Yatzilenu Amunai. Yud Kei Vav Kei is going to save us from these negative things. Anyway, so he comes along and he says, why does Moshe Rabbeinu have to give it this way? Just give us straight. So he says, he answers the question by asking another question. If you remember Rabotai, last week's Parshat, which is Kiteitzei, my Bar Mitzvah Parsha, we say over there that God is talking to Am Yisrael, and he says, God is telling Moshe Rabbeinu, I saved you from Bilam. Bilam wanted to curse the nation way back in Parashat Balak, but I saved the nation. Pasuk says, in the third source, V'lo ava, Baruch haba Emmanuel, V'lo ava, we have chalent and we have paupers. V'lo ava, we also have Torah, by the way, so if you want to take a sheet. V'lo ava Hashem Elokecha lishmoa el Bilam, and God did not listen to Bilam. V'yafoch Hashem Elokecha et hakilala livracha, and God turned the curses of Bilam to bracha. Why? Ki ahevecha Hashem Elokecha, because God, He loves us so much. Says the rabbi, he asks a question on this piece. He says, what does it mean? V'yafoch Hashem et hakilala livracha. What does it mean? Interpret it literally. And God switched the curses of Bilam to bracha. Let me ask you a question. Did Bilam ever curse the Jewish people? No, he didn't. He tried, but right away, what came out of his mouth? Brachot. So what does it mean? V'yafoch Hashem Elokecha et hakilala livracha. That God switched the cursings to a blessings. There was no curses that Hashem should switch it to a blessing. So what does it mean? V'yafoch Hashem Elokecha et hakilala livracha. There was no kilala. It only was bracha. So what in the world does it mean that a God switched his curses to a blessing? Is that question clear? He answered the question based on Gemara Moed Katan on Daf Tet, and we're going to read it together because it's a nice Gemara to say. Gemara says that one time you had two students, Rabbi Yonatan and you had Rabbi Yehuda ben Geri. And these two rabbis, they were learning Parshat Nedarim by Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. These two rabbis were learning Parshat Nedarim by Rashbi. That was the rabbi. And before they left yeshiva for the night, they told the Rashbi, okay, we're leaving. It ended up, they ended up staying in the yeshiva overnight. So in the morning, before they left again, they came to Rashbi, they asked him permission one more time, okay, Rabbi, we're leaving. And Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai asked the students, but you already asked me, you already told me that you're leaving. So what in the world are you asking me again? They answered, because we learned, the rabbi taught us, that if you say goodbye to your rabbi, and you end up staying the night anyway, when you leave in the morning, it's proper to say goodbye one more time. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was so impressed, he told his son, Rabbi Elazar, go get brachot from these two rabbis because they're considered very important people. That's what the Gemara says. Let's read that inside. It says the Gemara Katan in the fourth source, Rabbi Yonatan ben Asmai, Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim, these two rabbis, Tanu Parshat Nedarim be Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. They will learn Parshat Nedarim by Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Iftur minei be'urta. So they left him in the middle of the night. Mean to say they went back home at night time. They end up staying in the yeshiva at night. L'tzafra in the morning. Hadur v'kam mifterei minei. They got up and they wanted to leave again. Amar lehu. So Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai tells Rabbi Yonatan and Rabbi Yehuda, V'lav aftiritu minei be'urta. Did you not leave the yeshiva at night? Amrulei, they told him back. Limadetanu Rabbeinu. Rabbi, you told us that if you want to leave at night, Talmid nifta mirabo v'lam be'oto ha'ir. If a student leaves the yeshiva at night, but he stays in the same city, sarich lipater mimenu pam ha'eret. But you have to come back, you have to say goodbye one more time. Amar le librei. So Rashbi tells his son Rabbi Elazar, Bnei Adam halalu anashim shel tzurahi. These guys are considered very hashuv. Zil gabayon de libarhuch. Go and get baracha from these two rabbis. Okay, so Rabbi Elazar listens to his father. He goes to get a baracha, and they ask him, Amulei, ma ba'et hacha? Why did you come here? Why did you come for us? Amar lehu. He tells him back, the Amar li abba, because my father told me, Zil gabayu de libarhuch. My father told me go to these two people and get baracha. Amrulei. So they told him the following baracha. Listen, pay attention to the baracha that the rabbis give to Rabbi Elazar. Yehera Abba, Yiratzon. The Tizra below Tehatzad. Tayel below Tepuk. Tepuk below Tayel. Lirhov Beitach bilitov ushpizach. Libabel Prutach below Techazeh Shatah Hadetah. What does that mean? I translated it in English. They said to him as follows: may it be God's will that you should sow and you should not reap. That you should bring in merchandise and you should not take out merchandise. That you should take out, but you should not bring in. That your house should be destroyed and your lodging place should be inhabited. That your table should become confused and that you should not see a new year. That was the bracha that Rabbi Yonatan ben Asmai and Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim gave the son of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, Rabbi Elazar. What would your reaction be to this bracha? I would say Yishtabach Shemo Amen Be'en Nemo. That's what I would say. What in the world is he giving them this what a strange bracha? So the Gemara says that Rabbi Elazar, after he heard this, he was very pained over the fact that it seemed that they gave him a very strange type of blessing. It seemed like they cursed him. He knew that they didn't curse him because he knew these guys were Hashub, they were big Rabbanim. So he knew he knew that it definitely wasn't a curse, but at the same time, it gave him tzar, it gave him akbat nefesh, it gave him pain. So he goes back to his father. Amar Le, the Gemara continues, Mai amrulach, what did they tell you? And they told him, Haki b'haki amruli, and they gave me this very strange blessing. Amar Le, he tells them back, Hanach kuluhu birkata ninhu. Everything that they told you, in truth it was a blessing in disguise. And he explains it. Tizra v'lo tehtzad. When they told them that you shall sow and you shall not reap, what does that mean? Tolid banim v'lo yamutu. It means that you should have children, you should have sons, you should sow, but you shall not reap. That means they should not die. That's a bracha. You should have children, but they shouldn't die. Tayeh v'lo tipuk. He told them that you should bring in merchandise, but that merchandise shall not go out. Tayev kalata velo leimutu banach tilifikun. It means that you should bring in daughters-in-law, meaning to say that your children should get married and your sons shouldn't die, that the daughters will move out back to their parents' house. Therefore, you should bring in merchandise. The daughters-in-law you should bring in, but you're not going to send them out because your children are not going to die in their lifetime for them to go back to their mother's house as widows. Continue. Tepuk velo ta'el. You shall bring out merchandise, but you shall not take in the same thing. Tolin banata, you shall give birth to daughters. And when they get married, their husbands are not going to die, so they shall not return to your house. That means you shall send out merchandise. Your daughters will get married, and there's no reason for them to come back because their husbands will stay alive, and therefore they should not return to your house. Your house should get destroyed, and your home should be inhabited. The high alma ushpizach, because this world is considered ushpizach. And the eventual world is considered the world to come. Therefore, your current world should be inhabited, and you should go to olam haba. So that was the bracha. That was the interpretation of Rashbi to the bracha of Rabbi Yonatan and Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim. And now what's the question? What's the obvious question? I guess, so say it like that. The same thing, same question by Moshe Rabbeinu. So say it like that. One of the words you're giving this roundabout bracha, you're trying to give a bracha, but you're giving it in disguise. What's Peshat? So he explains by the Zohar. And he says, the Zohar says that the truth is when it comes to giving brachot, and keep this in mind, that it's not only the words that you give by the bracha. It's not only the words. It's really the words, but what's what you're thinking as you're saying the bracha itself. That's why it says, imrefi v'hegion libi lefanecha. What does it mean, imrefi v'hegion libi? Means you should find favor in my imrefi, in what I'm actually saying, but what's more important is hegion libi. It's really what's inside my heart. It's what's my kavanah as I am giving these brachot. So therefore, it's the words that you say when you give a blessing, but it's more like what you're thinking about at the time that you're giving the actual blessing itself. I think we told the story in the past. Roman, I think we mentioned this story to you before. There was one time there was a guy, true story. One time there was a rabbi, he was staying by some Amad's house, some ignoramus house on Shabbat. And all of a sudden by the Shabbat table after the Kiddush, what do? We go to our parents, we get brachot. And all of a sudden this guy, you know the story? Remember the story? The rabbi hears the father of the children, he puts his hands on their heads and he says, Elu ve'elu nistarfim be'bet hadeshin. What does that mean? This one and this one should be burnt in the house of ashes. That's what it is. We read it by the morning korbanot every single morning, right? Elu, this guy and that guy should be burnt in the house of ashes. And he's giving bracha. The whole house is getting that bracha. And he's giving to his daughters, to his sons. He gives it to his wife. Elu, this is tradition. And the rabbi can't understand. He goes, he comes up to me after the he says, what are you doing over here? He goes, what do you mean? He goes, you know what that means? Elu, he goes, no, I heard it in shul one time, therefore I thought it sounded nice, I'm giving this bracha to my children. He goes, no. He goes, you must stop doing this practice because you're be'etzim cursing the kids. And therefore he says, this is not really considered, bracha is really considered a curse. Later that night when he went to sleep, apparently an angel came to him in a dream and he told him, he goes, you made a big mistake. He goes, what did I do? He goes, this guy, his intention was so pure. It says in the Gemara, that God really wants our intention. God really wants our hearts. It doesn't matter what we know. It matters what our intention is. And since this guy, his intention was so pure, the guy had no idea what his words meant. But his kavanah was, I want to bless my kids. And he was so pure, he was so tamim, he was so, I wouldn't call it naive, but he was so like, tamim halech, holech Hashem Elokecha. Yeah, exactly, wholesome. He was so wholesome when he came to the blessing that it didn't matter what the words were. It was the kavanah that's behind it. And therefore he says that when it comes to giving barachot, it all depends on a person's, not the words itself, but really the kavanah that's considered behind it. That's the Zohar HaKadosh. Based on the Zohar, he wanted to answer the question by the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim, Rabbi Yonatan, these guys were very humble rabbis. And they said to themselves, Rabbi is sending his son to get a bracha from us. Who in the world are we to give Rabbi's son a bracha? Not only that, since we also learned Rabbi's son was also very high level. He also learned to decay with his father. So therefore, what in the world is Rabbi sending his son to get us, to give us, or to get from us a bracha? Something doesn't make sense. So therefore, they decided to give a bracha in disguise. They decided to give a bracha that could be misconstrued or that could be misinterpreted. So therefore, they knew, Yehuda ben Gerim and this Rabbi Yonatan, they knew that if they give him a very strange bracha, he's going to go to his father, he's going to complain, and his father is going to give the real interpretation to the bracha. So it turns out, who gave his son the bracha? The father did. That was the whole kavanah of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yonatan. They wanted to say, listen, we want to give bracha, but we're too humble. We're nothing to give bracha. Really, if this kid wants a bracha, he should get a bracha from his father. And therefore, we're going to make a very strange bracha so his father can interpret it. And once his father interprets it, God will consider his father giving the bracha and not us. That was the kavanah of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yonatan. Oh, now based on that interpretation of the kavanah, now we go to Bilam. See, with Bilam, it's the same exact thing. He said to himself, Hashem doesn't let me to curse. Hashem told him straight out, you cannot curse. Therefore, what is Bilam thinking as he's cursing? He's not thinking good stuff. He's talking good stuff. He's saying good stuff, but his kavanah is really, these Jews are going to die and they're all going to burn again. That's what he's really thinking. Now, at the same time, who's reading Bilam's mind as he's giving over the Hashemites? So his kavanah wasn't this. His kavanah was that he's going to use HaKadosh Baruch Hu in order to curse Am Yisrael. That was also his kavanah was, since Bilam, that when it comes to cursing and blessing, it goes based on what the person's thinking, not what the words are. Therefore, even though I'm going to be saying nice words, my kavanah is going to be very, very negative. And since God knows machshavot belev ish, turns out that who cursed Am Yisrael? Hashem did. That's why the Torah and the Pasuk has to tell me, V'lo ava Hashem Elokecha lishmoa el Bilam. God says, I'm not even going to listen to Bilam. I'm not even going to go inside his head and even think about what he's thinking, because once I do that, it's considered as if what? That I'm helping him curse my nation. And therefore, yeah, indeed, V'yafoch Hashem Elokecha etakel ala lebracha. That's why, even though we asked the question, when in the world does Kilah, he was no curse. And so there was a curse. There was a curse right here. And therefore, in order not to listen to Bilam, he completely blocked out the thoughts of Bilam from Hashem's mind, or Hashem blocked out his thoughts, then he switched his cursing to Bemet, the blessing. Therefore, I guess in this case, since there was no thought process, because no one heard it, only the blessings themselves, they all came true. Now, based on that, he says, now we understand Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu come to our parasha. What do we say? Tavo, and he's cursing Am Yisrael tzach kelalot. He's giving us these bad curses. But what do we say? That he threw Yud-Kei Vav-Kei's in there in order to sweeten the judgment. 26, I'm 26, 676, in order to make it all sweet. But we ask the question, why do it this way? Why not just give us the blessings straight out? The same exact kavanah. Moshe Rabbeinu know that he wants to give blessings to Am Yisrael, but at the same time, Moshe Rabbeinu says to himself, who am I? Who am I to give barachot? Therefore, I'm going to use HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bless the Am Yisrael. And therefore he said, I'm going to give them curses. That's just going to be what's going to be on my lips. But my true kavanah is Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Throughout the entire thing, I'm sprinkling Yud-Kei Vav-Kei throughout the entire item, just so at the end of the day, who's going to bless Am Yisrael? Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. So therefore he says that the lesson is that a lot of times in life, we see a lot of what seemingly is curses. But bottom line, he says the whole thing is really considered a baracha. Of course, we can't see it, and sometimes we never even notice it. And maybe we're never ever going to notice it. But he says the bottom line is that sometimes when there's curses, the truth is it's really considered a blessing. Now, I was going to end this shiur over here, but b'siyata d'shmaya, this always happens to me. Talking about a topic, and all of a sudden these things, they just, I meet somebody, or I hear something, I read inside a book, and it fits in so nicely. Today was 9/11. A lot of commemorations going on everywhere, and mamash, happenstance, I happened to stumble on a few like miracle stories of 9/11 that it seemed in the beginning that it was a curse, but the truth is it was a blessing in disguise. Recently, I bought Chacham Baruch book. I told you about the Chacham Baruch book. I finished it last week. 541 pages, I finished the book. I mean, so yeah, it took me about 3 weeks. Baruch Hashem, I stuck to it and I finished the book. I was very, very studious with it. So at the end of the book, it tells a story. I read the story this past week, Mamash, right before 9/11. But one of the stories they told about the great teacher, it says that he had one of his congregants, members of the shul, was a guy by the name of Jerry Natkin. Jerry Natkin, he owned a famous jeweler, Tom, you know what, Emmanuel? The jewelry called William Bartman Jewelers. William Bartman Jewelers is owned by a Sephardi guy from Brooklyn, Jerry Natkin. He had tons of stores everywhere. He's a very, very affluent, very, very wealthy guy. One day he comes to Chacham Baruch in the spring of 2001. And he tells him, he says, Rabbi, I have a chance to open up a brand new flagship store in the city. Oh, this store is going to be huge. It's going to be massive. But my new contract demands, this mall that they're putting it in, my new contract demands that I have to open on Shabbat also. I was never open on Shabbat before, but now, this I can make a lot of money with this new deal. And I'm coming to the rabbi to make a contract between myself and a goy. The goy will own it for the Shabbat. All the dividends will be considered his, and I'll take the other 6 days of the week. So he's coming to the rabbi, Chacham Baruch, to write the contract. Chacham Baruch tells him, listen, I don't feel comfortable with this, go to some other rabbi. And he tells him, I don't want to go to another rabbi, you're my rabbi, I want you to do it. He looked at me, he tells me, listen, Jerry, he says, could you put food on the table without this store? He says, well, of course I can. Of course I can. He owns a lot of stores. Of course I can put food. He goes, then I recommend you not take the store. He goes, but Rabbi, I can make tons of money. He goes, Jerry, if you don't need the money, he says, don't take it. Don't take the store. He ended up listening to his rabbi. And of course, the store was supposed to be on the ground floor of the Twin Towers. He still keeps the contract. He signed the contract, by the way. He had to back out of the contract because Chacham Baruch told him not to do it. He still keeps a copy of that contract on his office wall in order to remind him always that when you listen to the rabbis, even though it doesn't make sense what they're saying, and he could have stood to make a lot of profit, bottom line is that what seemed to him as a curse in the beginning, he's telling him not to take the store. He stood to lose tremendous profit. What seemed to be a cursing in the beginning, truth is it was a blessing in disguise. We'll end with one more story. Today I went to take a walk. I had lunch, I went to take a walk. And instead of, listening to a podcast or whatever, some shit up like that, I go on YouTube and I put Rabbi Yoel Gold. Rabbi Yoel Gold has probably about 50 or 60 YouTube videos throughout the entire page. I clicked on a random one. It was called Saved by the Accident. I'm not making this up. You can't make this up. I pressed on Saved on the Accident. Again, I had no idea. I never saw this video before, so I clicked on it. And I said, okay, what is this story going to tell me? It was a 6-minute story. Listen to the following story. He says that there were two guys in yeshiva, they were roommates. One of them was, let me get the names. One of them was, I didn't write it down, Yechiel. So Yechiel was one of them, and a guy by the name of Joel Bess was the second guy. Joel Bess and Yechiel. I don't remember Yechiel's last name. So these two guys were roommates in yeshiva in Israel. After the year in yeshiva was over, Joel goes back to Los Angeles, which is where he lived, and Yechiel goes back to New York, where he lived. A couple of months later, Joel gets a call from Yechiel. And Yechiel says, Joel, I always wanted to see Los Angeles. I want to see Hollywood. I want to see California. Do you mind if I come to your house? He goes, of course, come to my house. Just stay by my house a week. Yechiel flies from New York to Los Angeles, and he rents a car. 18 years old guy, he rents a car. And they're having a good time. They're driving back and forth a couple of days. And all of a sudden, it's very late at night. And Yechiel leaves the keys to his car on the kitchen counter. And Joel can't fall asleep. Happens to be there was another guy there also. So the other guy and Joel decide, listen, Yechiel is sleeping. We're not going to tell him. We're going to take the keys. And we'll go for a joyride. They get inside the car, and they go. 2 o'clock in the morning, they're flying through the streets of LA. All of a sudden, as you know, it was Murphy's rule, right? Murphy's law. All of a sudden, boom. They rear-end somebody very, very bad. They knock the car goes flying. And these kids are panicked. Not their car. Not on the, insurance policy. They had no permission to drive it. They basically stole the car. They panic. And they leave the scene of the accident. Both this guy Joel and the other guy, they run back to Joel's house. They get back to Joel's house, their faces are pale, their heart is beating, they have no idea what to do, and after all the commotion, Yechiel wakes up, he goes, guys, what's going on? He goes, listen, don't freak out, but we stole your car. We took your car without permission, this rent-a-car, and we got into a very bad accident. And also now Yechiel starts panicking. He's not from Los Angeles, he's from New York. His parents are going to kill him. That's what most 18-year-olds are thinking at this point. And they have an idea. What's their genius idea? They're going to go back to the scene of the accident, right? Go back to the scene of the accident. They're going to tell the police that Yechiel, who was on the car policy, was really driving. And he panicked because he heard LA, carjacking is there. He got nervous. But now he's here. He thought everything was okay. Now he's back. Yechiel says that's a great idea. They walk back to the scene of the accident. And now there's police there, of course. And Yechiel approaches the police officer. It was a rookie getting trained by an older man. So he says, officer, I apologize, I was driving the car. He goes, you were driving the car? He goes, I was driving the car. He goes, and you left the scene? He goes, I left the scene, I was nervous, carjacking, whatever, but now I'm back. He goes, hold on a second, you were driving the car, you got into an accident, and you left the scene? He goes, yeah, but I'm back now. He goes, that's a hit and run. Turn around. And he puts the cuffs on him. He puts the cuffs on him, and he puts him in the jail the entire night. He said it was the worst night of his life. Where he's in the jail, the county thing, with criminals and whatever. The next morning he makes bail. And he sees this Joel guy and this other guy that drove the car. And he goes, you guys left me to burn. He said, you guys are the worst guys on planet Earth. He goes, I spent the worst night of my life. I hate both of you. I never want to see you again. And that's it. And he flies back to New York. And for the next 10 years, Yechiel is flying back and forth from New York to Los Angeles, dealing with lawyers and court cases and judges and whatever. It was the worst 10 years of his life. He didn't speak to Joel for 20 years. Listen to the story, 20 years. All of a sudden, one day, Yechiel was walking Far Rockaway. He moved to Far Rockaway. He's walking in Far Rockaway, and he sees the guy. He meets the guy for the first time in a coffee shop, and the guy introduces himself as last name Bess. He goes, oh, Bess. He goes, are you related to the Bess in Los Angeles? He goes, Joel? He goes, yeah, Joel. He goes, Joel's my brother. He goes, get him on the phone. I got to tell him something. So he calls Joel on the phone. He goes, Joel, guys, I have a guy Yechiel over here. And Joel's thinking, oh my gosh, it's been 20 years. The guy's gonna read me Parshat Tavo. He gets on the phone, and Yechiel tells Joel, he goes, listen, he goes, I gotta tell you a story. He goes, but I gotta see you face to face. You gotta come to New York. He goes, okay, I'll come to New York, the least I can do. He flies all the way to New York a week later, and he meets with him, and he says, I have to tell you a story. He says, after the whole balagan was over, about the flying back and forth, and finally, when I got the case expunged and the judge let me go, he goes, I went to college, and I got my degree in financing. After I got my degree in financing, he says, I went to apply for a job in the city. And he says, the job was a shoo-in, he says. I had the best credentials. I was overqualified for the job. I just had to come in. I could have came in with my pants off and I would have gotten the meeting. I would have got the job. So after the end, he said, they gave me the employee papers. Take this to HR, go fill them out. We'll give you a call. He takes the page to HR, he's filling them out, and one of the boxes said, have you ever been arrested? So he says to himself, he goes, yeah, I mean, I was, but it wasn't my fault. But I can't lie, they do background checks on these things anyway. So he checked, yes, I was arrested. Needless to say, didn't get a call back, didn't get the job. And he's telling this to Joel, and Joel starts apologizing. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it to you. He grabs his hand, he goes, Joel, he goes, relax. He goes, that job that I applied for was in the Twin Towers. Was in the Twin Towers, exactly. And if you wouldn't have gotten into the accident, if I wouldn't have gotten into the accident, you wouldn't have gotten into the accident, it could be that I wouldn't be here today. P.S., that's not the crazy part of the story. P.S. to the story, something they didn't realize at the time of telling of the story. Rabbi Gold is talking now. He says he asked Yechiel if he has the papers of the expungement with the judge signed off. He goes, yeah, I have it. It's in my documentation. He opens up the documentation. You want to guess what date the judge signed the paper on in order to expunge? It was September 11th, 1997. It was a few years right before the planes hit the Twin Towers. In the beginning, Yechiel was looking at this case, the biggest curse of my life. The biggest curse of my life. Yeah, I was arrested. I'm not getting any jobs because of it. I spent thousands of dollars on lawyers and plane tickets all the way to Los Angeles and back. It's a cursing. But at the same time, it was a blessing in disguise. Therefore, he says, it sounds like over here, Parshat Tavo, Moshe Rabbeinu is giving us these sakelalot. You're thinking to himself, wow, why is Moshe Rabbeinu doing this? The answer is just pay attention to the way he says it. He's throwing Yud Kevavke in there. He's sweetening the judgment. 26 Yud Kevavke is times 26 of the Gematria. Everything is 676. Everything is considered Hesed. To be Mevatel, the curse is Gitavo. The lesson is, Rabotai, is that a lot of times when things go bad in our lives, when we think to ourselves, why is Hashem cursing me? The answer is, it's not a curse. It's really a blessing in disguise. Shabbat shalom.